and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Freeze in the studio.
He's actually going to wear this coat throughout because it is about 10 degrees in this studio.
Okay.
And we're in fact in a special, different, smaller studio because we have technical difficulties in our main studio. So that's what you need to know at the moment. Also, you need to know free speech is changing our airing schedule a little. We'll tell you more about that later in the show. And if you want details, write to andyhelm@aol.com. And you'll get that and other details. Big news this week on several fronts. First of all, in the Utah marriage case, as we are taping, the governor of Utah has just made a pronouncement that's no good. We'll discuss that.
Got to tell you about, in Seattle, a horrible arson attack on a packed gay bar.
But with a good ending. Former Minnesota Viking punter Chris Kluwe's exposure of a bigoted coach is huge news in Minnesota.
And in California, that transgender student protection bill has gone into effect, but it is in some peril now.
But the checked shirt you see on the side of the screen there belongs to our very, very distinguished guest, David Tuller, a veteran author and journalist who has just come back from Russia and is here to tell us about it. He wrote a book about Russia several years ago.
Back in 96.
Cracks in the Iron Closet, Travels in Gay and Lesbian Russia. And he has just been back in Russia and has come back and profiled several individuals living in large cities outside of Moscow. He's written this up for BuzzFeed. You can find it there on their site.
And if you are on our email list, you'll get a link to it.
Far from Russia's biggest cities, being gay means being always under threat. And parenthetically, you are actually mainly a health and science writer, teach at the Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. Wrote the Truvada piece. Truvada is prep in last week's New York Times. We'll talk to you about that in a minute. But Russia, what's going on in Russia?
And what's changed?
Well, it's obviously a very difficult situation right now. Since the one of the things, I went back to Russia. I lived there in the 90s, and so I went back and I wanted to do a story from the provinces. And in Russia, everything that's not Moscow or Petersburg is the provinces. So most of the reporting so far on the gay propaganda campaign or anti-gay propaganda campaign has been written from Moscow or Petersburg or from about Sochi, about the Olympics. And I thought it was important to talk a little bit about what people were experiencing out in the countryside. Excuse me. So I spent a few days in a couple of cities about 500 miles from Moscow, southeast of Moscow, Samara and Tolyatti, and talked to some, people locally and what the activism they were doing, and the sort of a couple of them had very terrible experiences about being beaten up, being harassed and so on and so forth.
Well, tell us the stories of what it's like to live under this new regime, this anti-gay regime in Russia.
Well,
Russia doesn't have a sodomy law,
right,
but it has this horrible anti-gay law.
Right. So in 1993, Russia repealed, under pressure from the West, Russia repealed its sodomy law. So at that point, it was, basically, since we had sodomy laws in various states, still it was freer theoretically than we were here. With regard to that, they were ahead of us. Strange to say about Russia. In that perspective. Anyway, so since then, in the last, past these, first in about 10 different regions, over the last couple of years, before it got a lot of attention here, they passed anti-gay propaganda laws in about these 10 different regions. And then they took it up in Russia, in the central government.
And what do you think provoked them doing all this?
I think basically it's a political move. Putin, won re-election, but there were protests and there were challenges to his presidency, and I think he just wanted to do this to sort of rev up nationalist fervor, which is pretty easy to do in many countries, including Russia.
Convenient scapegoat.
Convenient scapegoat. Gay people, LGBT people are always a convenient scapegoat, and it's found fertile soil among the vast majority of Russians who don't know gay people.
Right.
It's not that they're horrible people. They just, most of them don't live in Moscow and Petersburg, and most of them, have the same prejudices that people have all the world over. So it's been really difficult, and I think what's helped people so far is that the Olympics are going to be happening, and so Putin doesn't want to do anything too terrible, I think, before the Olympics. People are
Other
very
than
concerned.
pass this law.
Okay, well, yes,
nationally.
this is terrible, but I don't think that they expected it to have this kind of resonance. I think the way they've positioned it is, it's not making, homosexuality is not illegal. Having a gay club is not illegal. Being gay is not illegal. They position it as protecting youth, and that's what they've done. I don't think they expected it to get the attention it's gotten.
But they're not protecting gay bars. A lot of them are getting attacked.
Yes, and so I think one of the problems that's happened is that the government is not, breaking into people's homes and arresting them for being gay. That's not happening, and I doubt that will ever happen. But what it does do is it gives them a reason to act against anyone they don't like. Two, it also basically gives license to anybody who's, homophobic to beat people up, to just fire them, to do whatever.
And there is a bill that they withdrew about taking people's kids away if they're gay or lesbian, which has a good chance of passage, I suppose, after the Olympics.
That's very possible. They passed
That's
a law.
pretty
Yes,
extreme.
that's very extreme, and people are terrified.
And Masha Gessen, the journalist, has gotten out of the country with her kids.
And so Masha left with her kids because she was very worried about that law passing.
Tell us about some of the people you profiled individually and what has happened to them.
Well, the one guy that I spent some time with, Konstantin Galava, he lives in the city of Tolyatti, and he's basically the only publicly out gay person there. So he's 22, which is young to be having to do all this stuff. He had been started posting a couple of years ago items about gay and lesbian news on his web pages. And so rumors started that he was gay, even though he didn't say at that point that he was gay. He started having harassment at work. He got beat up a couple of times. In one place, he was abducted by 4 guys. Someone had contacted him to arrange a meeting, like a young guy, and he went, and on the street corner, these 4 thugs grabbed him, pushed him into a car, drove him to a courtyard, beat him up, took his phone, found his mother's number, called her and said, "Your son's a pederast and a pervert, and should we kill him?" The parents, of course, were beside themselves. Then they said to him, "You're just a pig, you're not even worth killing," and they drove off. And so the police, of course, are not used to gay people coming and saying, "I was beaten up because I'm gay." They don't want to take those cases, and they don't. So he went to the police. The police didn't take the case. That's just one of a number of incidents that he's had.
But what is it about the police not even looking into cases of violence in these cases?
Well, the police, what can I say? They're the Russian police. They don't necessarily
You said they're nice people.
There's a difference. Individual nice people, individual one-to-one is one thing, and people living in a context in which it's sort of almost impossible to have address these things. It's just very difficult.
I mean, we've known this in our own country from decades ago, and some people still across the country here, lead rather isolated lives and wouldn't even think of coming out.
Right.
But this guy was doing AIDS education, trying to do AIDS education in his villa, in his city.
Right. So one thing that happened with him was that he was working with a local HIV group, and they were doing a sort of an AIDS education program or an event on the main plaza. In the main plaza, there's a eternal flame to those who died in World War II, which in Russia is 20 million people died. So it's really not just soldiers, but population. So that's considered, those eternal flames are considered sort of significant, monuments. But people have events there all the time, and so they spread out a fabric and put red candles in the form of red candles in the form of a ribbon, and they put out a little bowl of condoms. And so then, which they then started distributing. And so it got reported in news in Moscow how gay activists, laid condoms at the foot of the eternal flame, insulting our dead and so on. And it became a big national kind of scandal when he tried to hold a press conference to explain, no, we weren't putting the preservatives there, we just had them with us, the condoms with us to distribute. He was then attacked again. He had red paint thrown over him, which infected one of his eyes, and it just really bad.
And Russia accounts, I believe, for half the cases of AIDS in Europe at this point.
I'm not sure what the exact numbers are. For the most part, it's become more of a injection drug use epidemic, although, of course, gay people are still very concerned
This
about it.
26-year-old activist who died this past week, who obviously was not getting the drugs that he needed.
Well, I think it's, we have a problem with our healthcare system here. To the degree there, it used to be a free system. It's now everything's paid, or everything you have to pay. If you go to the hospital, you have to bring your own medication. There's a lot of issues where you have to have money to do it. I don't know that particular circumstance of that case, but it's certainly possible that. I mean, I do know people who are getting the drugs and other people who are not.
So here you have Putin picking us to scapegoat to shore up his support among the Russian people, which seems to have worked for him to get that support because of the ignorance, basically, of the populace that doesn't know us. You have the worldwide pushback from people outraged at this whole system. And now people are saying, well, what about after the Olympics? What's going to happen? And clearly, from what you've just described, this isn't a question of people, LGBT people, just being subject to scorn. There is real danger of violence all over the country.
There is real danger of violence. And when you go there, there are reports cropping up. Someone was murdered in Volgograd, like in the spring, and then someone else was attacked here, and someone else was fired there. So there does seem to be a fair amount of this going on, anecdotally. And I think people are very, very scared. Not just LGBT people, but that's what we're talking about, but what's going to happen after the Olympics. No one's going to hold his feet to the fire after that. He has to sort of, again, behave somewhat until the Olympics, but after that, it's not clear.
And he has been horrible to immigrants, dissidents, the Pussy Riot
he's not a nice
people.
guy.
No, I mean, but that's the thing. This is his reaction to losing a little bit of a grip on power because of the dissidents. I mean, is the dissident movement going to rise again, do you think? I mean,
there's always, I don't think they can go back to what it was under the Soviet era. I mean, that's, people are different now, and people have grown up, and young people have grown up in a different society. I think it can become extremely totalitarian. I don't think it's going back to like an ideological kind of a perspective as they used to have. But again, I think we don't really know what's going to happen after the Olympics. And I think what the activists that I talked to did not want the Olympics to be boycotted. They wanted people to come, but they wanted the athletes to be able to make expressions of support, or to come out, or to be able to have some significant statements happening during the Olympics.
And we are seeing some signs of that. We're seeing individual athletes from all over the world beginning to speak up, beginning to put this Principle 6 logo on things, on a hat, on a bobsled.
The Olympic principle of non-discrimination.
Yes. World leaders deciding not to go to Sochi. Do you think there will be any indigenous protest or display during the Olympics?
I think that people will try. I don't know how successful they'll be or how close they'll be able to get, but I think they're certainly, certainly possible. I hope that they feel that they can do something to that effect.
Well, Putin has now said all you have to do is apply to the security forces and you can have a demonstration.
One of the ironic things is that Sochi was known as kind of like the Fire Island of Russia. I mean, people would go there. When I was there in the 90s, that's where people would often go for vacation, and there were little areas where you could, men were hanging out, and that's where people went. So, it's ironic that this is now happening sort of focused on that as well.
Too bad.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the other subject we wanted to discuss with you. You are a longtime health and science writer. You write regularly for the New York Times, and last week you had a piece there talking about the current situation with the use of the Truvada combination drug as pre-exposure prophylaxis, which the FDA approved some time ago. And we thought we'd see a lot of gay men and others on this drug on a regular basis to prevent HIV infection. And your piece suggests that, in fact, it's not being used as much as
people had expected.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the researchers thought when this first became it seemed like it was a possibility a couple of years ago, that once it was approved, that there really would be a ramp up of people using it. Doctors have always been, since Truvada was approved for HIV treatment, of course, doctors could prescribe it for anybody off label. So there probably already were some people using it, a few years ago. But they expected it, I think, to be a real ramp up, and I think that it's turned out to be an unrealistic expectation. The numbers seem to be a couple of thousand people have gotten prescriptions for it,
and half of them are women.
Which I think again was surprising to some people because women who maybe are in a serodiscord relationship with someone who's HIV positive and might want to get pregnant. This is a way for them to be able to do that and still protect themselves. The data show that if you take the pill daily, no one will say it's 100% effective, but it seems to be pretty close to 100% effective. The concern, of course, is that, one, the cost, which is, it's $1,000 a month, or more than $1,000. Insurance is covering it, but, of course, that's a use of health resources, so some people get concerned about that.
And our young gay men of color, who may be the most vulnerable to new infections, do they have the insurance coverage?
So there's a
access?
sort of a factor, that kind of social justice factor to consider. And there's also concern that people will not take it every day and will then not be fully protected and will then get infected, not know they're infected with a Truvada-resistant strain of HIV, and then pass that around, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole chain of consequences you can imagine, but nobody really has any idea if that's going to happen or will it happen.
So what do we need to see? I mean, should there be a big campaign across the country to get a lot of people on this drug, especially if people aren't going to be using, a lot of people are abandoning condoms.
Right. So basically there's a big discussion now about who is this appropriate for. There's older gay men who, did spend many, many years using condoms. There's some of them who are very upset by this because why can't they use condoms? A lot of straight people too saying the same thing. So it's not really clear, who this is going to be good for. I think there'll be a lot more research coming out over the next couple of years of who's taking it, how are they using it. They're also researching different kinds of formulations, injectables. If they can have an injectable you take once a month, that's easier than a pill every day.
Absolutely.
So there's going to be a lot of changes over the next few years.
And side effects are potential.
Side effects are a potential problem too. There don't seem to be serious side effects for most people, but there are some serious ones for some people.
And of course, drug adherence of people who already have HIV is one of the keys to prevention because that suppresses the virus and makes you less infectious. And the reason young men of color are getting HIV is because they use condoms apparently more than white kids. But they're drawing from a pool of people who are less likely to know that they're infected or less likely to be drug adherent.
Right. So there's a higher what they say community viral load in the African American community than in the non-African American community. And so again, I think it's very important to make it clear that they're not engaging in riskier behavior.
Right.
They're just in a pool.
They're being safer in many cases.
Yes, they're more exposed. They have more chances of exposure.
And again, you're talking about viral load, not having the infection.
Right. And so, and you're right. I mean, one of the things that's happened over the last number of years is that people who are in effective treatment and their viral load is suppressed are, believed, and the data seems to show this, that they're really not infectious.
So they didn't want to use condoms or take Truvada.
Right. Well, that's been an issue. I mean, some younger guys who have not lived through the epidemic in the same way that we have. Don't have the same life experience of it, and nor should they. I mean, they shouldn't have to be terrorized about sex.
No.
So, to the degree that this might help some people get over that, I think it's a good thing. I think there are a lot of issues still to be discussed and to be worked out, and I think this is really just the beginning of this kind of debate because, again, there's going to be new formulations. I think when there's an injectable, it'll be much easier. The cost, everybody's upset about the cost now, but drug prices change. So, I think there's a lot more developments to come in this area.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing us up to date on developments in both areas. And come back, but not in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
David Tuller looked to BuzzFeed for his piece. I gotta get the
it's called
Far from Russia's biggest cities, being gay means being always under threat.
And that will be in our email this week
from
Andy Hum at AOL. If you want to be on our email list, just
I'm going to move over a little and get you two too, so we can change our angle a little. Maybe our angle is right here. Okay. So, Utah marriage.
That's the big news. Well, big things happened this week. First of all, the Supreme Court of the United States granted the stay of the judge's order overturning the constitutional amendment in Utah banning same-sex marriage, and they didn't give a reason for that.
Well, the stay means no more same-sex marriages until this works its way further through the courts.
Stop the clock. And the governor took that to a different degree, because we wondered what's going to happen to the 1,324 same-sex couples that got married. And the governor is saying everything is frozen for them. Well, they're still married, but we don't recognize it. And if they got any benefits while there was this little period where there was no stay, they've got those, but they don't get anything else, and we don't recognize them. Now, the federal government should recognize them. As we tape this, we haven't heard from the Obama administration on this, but they should be recognized like any other legally married same-sex couple.
And I would argue that the state should recognize them too.
Absolutely.
And I suspect this will be litigated along with the basic case of whether these couples should be allowed to marry in the first place. So we're now starting to put out different arms of this,
Yes.
and it's all going to be a big mess. And thank you to all the couples who did get married, because you're the ones who are pressing this forward.
And do you think the Supreme Court was listening to that 35-year-old man who went on a hunger strike to stop same-sex marriages in Utah?
No.
Somebody did. He wasn't eating anything.
Look, the right wing held a big meeting, too, that said the police and clerks should stop the marriages because they were against the state constitutional amendment.
The National Organization for Marriage, which we now call the National Organization for Money, because they raise so much from so few people. But
that's all they care about.
They pretty much signaled that they don't think we're going to win in the long run, and they're going to win in the long run in Utah. So we need now a federal constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage, and you ain't getting that.
Well, look, in the end, we're going to win all these things, but not yet.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Attorney General of Utah is putting out a want ad for lawyers to help him in this case.
$2 million they're going to spend on outside counsel for a case they're going to lose. Your tax dollars at work.
Yeah.
But the governor of New Mexico, Ms. Martinez, a Republican who does not support same-sex marriage, is saying we're done. It's the law of the land now. I'm not in favor of trying to do a constitutional amendment in New Mexico to stop it.
Which wouldn't work anyway, but good for her for recognizing that. Meanwhile, even though same-sex marriage is now fully legal in New Mexico, done no further work, we think, there are a few outlying Republican legislators who would like to push this amendment, and our side, in a coalition of major groups, has put together a new educational campaign, including TV ads, that is going to say to New Mexicans, this is the right thing, this is good for the state, be happy with this.
Right. I mean, there are 25 lawsuits in this country in 15 states around same-sex marriage. Updating you on a couple of them: in Arizona, 4 same-sex couples have filed a class action lawsuit, and the former governor, Janet Napolitano, now supports same-sex marriage.
Because she recognizes that the arc of history has moved on.
She's going to Sochi.
Yeah, we're still waiting for her to come out. And in Arizona, there's still a pending lawsuit, class action suit for benefits for same-sex couples, aside from marriage.
In West Virginia, there's a lawsuit that survived 2 motions to dismiss it, though the federal judge there, Robert Chambers, indicated he might dismiss on standing part of the suit that the unmarried couples who were challenging it on the basis of not recognizing out-of-state marriages. They haven't gotten married.
I lost you 2 minutes ago.
All right.
In Houston, out-lesbian Mayor Anise Parker declared some time ago that she was going to give benefits to the same-sex spouses of city employees. Then the right wing went to court, got a judge to put a stay on that. But now a federal judge has lifted that stay, and benefits will flow to the same-sex spouses of city employees in Houston.
In Michigan, the federal challenge to same-sex marriage ban there goes to trial on February 25th. Michigan, by the way, is refusing to let a married gay man change his name on his driver's license automatically because he got married.
He can go to court and pay to change his name,
outrageous.
but that's an unequal treatment. In Colorado, the Alliance Defending Freedom, which used to be just the Alliance Defense Fund, has appealed the Colorado court decision against the Masterpiece Cake Shop. They're still trying to argue that the owners should have the right to impose their religious beliefs on a public accommodation.
They are saying forcing Americans, this is a quote, to promote ideas against their will undermines constitutional guarantees of freedom of expression. So this is going to get into whether baking a cake is speech,
expression,
especially, as opposed to, because the guy says, I'll serve gay customers if they come in the store, I'll give them a cake, but I'm not going to make a wedding cake for a gay wedding.
But he said that before he knew what was going to be on the cake. And that
like
may be what this turns on.
2 men or 2 women.
Well, on a
Dolls.
cake, perhaps in California, is an acknowledgement of the wedding of Jane Wagner and Lily Tomlin.
We have a
who,
picture of them.
After being together, do we have
42 years.
42 years together and finally legal.
They've also been collaborators in their work. Liz Smith broke the story, the former closet
I
case.
should hope so.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't announce it themselves. What else? Senator Mark Warner of Virginia is calling the Obama administration to end the discrimination against same-sex couples seeking veterans' home loans. He wants it based on whether they are legally married, not where they live.
Also breaking as we started to tape today is news on the implementation of the transgender student protection law in California. It went into effect in January, so it delineates the rights transgender students have in schools. They were always covered under a non-discrimination law, but this makes it more explicit. The right wing has been trying to gin up a voter referendum to get rid of this law.
Because they can't do any more marriage referendums.
Not there anyway. So we have been following for weeks the counting of the signatures on their petitions for this proposed referendum. And the law went into effect no matter, because they haven't done the referendum yet. And they have achieved enough of a count in the sample to move on to a full counting of the signatures.
If the count in the sample, the percentage holds up, that's not enough to clear the referendum.
Yeah, it has to come out better in the full count.
One more marriage note. In New York, an upstate town clerk, Rose Marie Belfonte, made a big stink about same-sex marriage in 2011 when it passed, saying she wouldn't sign any more marriage licenses at all because that would have meant signing ones for gays. Well, she did do some straight people on the sly, and it's an outrage.
A couple of them.
Well, she should be. Well, she did a bunch of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know.
Yeah. All right. In Seattle, a terrible story of the Neighbors nightclub, New Year's Eve. Just after midnight, someone started to smell smoke, and they discovered that the staircase, that's the second floor nightclub.
It's been there for 30 years.
Yes, was a very popular, legendary place in Seattle, was on fire.
Well, somebody took gasoline, spread it all over the carpet that led to the second floor. This could have been like Happy Land in New York, where 100 people died, because there were over 700 people in the club. 2 soldiers who were there thought quickly, got a hold of the fire alarms, fire extinguisher, put the thing out, and saved the day. It did set off the sprinklers. The staff pulled the alarms. Wow. That could have been
evoked a couple of things. One of the legendary horror stories in the gay community was of a nightclub in New Orleans that was attacked by arson
where
many
I
years
believe
ago.
It was 35 people, mostly from the Metropolitan Community Church in New Orleans, who were killed.
Terrible, terrible
40
instance.
years ago.
And it turns out that this nightclub in Seattle, the Neighbors nightclub, had been attacked by members of the Aryan Nation from Idaho in 1990 who planned to plant pipe bombs there. There was an FBI informant who'd been planted with the Aryan Nation group who blew the whistle on this, and they managed to arrest everybody and pick up these pipe bombs before they were actually detonated at the club. But this is, we just talked about people being violently attacked in Russia. It has not stopped here.
Well, let's not leave Seattle then. We told you about the Catholic school administrator who was fired because he got married by the Catholic school, and the kids protested all over the city. Well, a lesbian who gets hired occasionally there to choreograph musicals at the same school, Eastside Catholic, is engaged to marry her partner and wonders if school leaders will still hire her. She's not under contract at the moment. The show that she did for them the last time was Footloose, which is all about repressing kids who want to dance.
Well, a couple more notes on that Eastside Catholic school. 80 kids rallied for the vice principal over the Christmas holidays. They have a couple more demonstrations planned, including on January 31st, which they're calling Z-Day, after the vice principal who was fired, Zamuda. Everyone is supposed to wear orange on January 31st because that's one of the school colors. And he has also announced that the Sister Mary whatever, the head of the school, told him, look, you get divorced, you can have your job back. Right. It's really just the paper of getting married that disturbs us.
Hey, this is progress because now the Catholic Church believes in divorce.
As well as people living together in sin.
Absolutely. Now, here's another Seattle story. You remember the controversy over the sign language interpreter at Mandela's funeral?
Yeah.
The Seattle Gay Men's Chorus is being challenged by deaf people who say that their longtime interpreter, Kevin Gallagher, is an expressive performer, but he does not know American Sign Language. He's been there for like 30 years. So they say they've complained before, nothing was done about it. But now the chorus says, we're going to get him trained.
We're training him.
We're going to get him trained. But he's done Broadway shows. He's done the gay games. I guess it wasn't helping too many deaf people.
Charlie Crist, now running for governor of Florida as a Democrat, having been the governor before as a Republican, who was anti-same-sex marriage and widely rumored to be a homosexual.
Well, it was in the movie Outrage, and if Mike Rogers got you in that movie, you're gay.
But then he got married to a woman, as you would say. And now he's trying to get the gay community to support him for governor. And he gave an interview to the gay press, his first interview to the gay press, and he says, sorry, I was just trying to be a good Republican. Please forgive me.
It was political expediency, he admitted.
I'm much happier now.
Politicians never do that.
And a member of the state legislature put in a bill for civil unions, and I said to her, go for marriage.
Speaking of politics, in Yonkers, veteran marriage equality activist Michael Sabatino was elected to the Yonkers City Council back in 2011 and now has been elected the minority leader. He's a Democrat.
Okay. New gay mayors have taken office at the first of the year in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and Seattle. And there's a new gay president of the city council in Pittsburgh, elected by fellow council members.
In New York City, homeless youth are suing in federal court in Brooklyn, saying the city is legally obligated to provide shelter to youth 16 to 20. But it turns hundreds away every night. There are an estimated 3,800 homeless kids and only 253 shelter beds in the city of New York. And, the suit says 10 to 30% of them are HIV positive.
Sports news. Chris Kluwe, former punter for the Vikings, says...
and a big, straight ally of ours. Fierce
huge,
advocate for us.
Really. We could go through his story, but we don't have time. Right. But his new news is that one of his coaches, a guy who is, by the way, in the running to be the head coach of the team now... Mike Priefer.
Priefer.
Yeah.
Says he's an anti-gay bigot. He says what he said was, we should round up all the gays, send them to an island, and then nuke it until it glows.
Sounds like he should be in Russia.
Yeah. He vehemently denies this, and he claims that he has a gay family member. But he isn't suing Kluwe, who says that says he's got witnesses.
But the Vikings immediately announced that they were going to look into this. They were taking this seriously. They hired an Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court or something, and another lawyer to investigate this. NCLR is coming in to...
National Center for Lesbian Rights.
Yeah, Kate Kendall is coming in to help Kluwe and his local lawyer. This is continuing to be a big deal.
I mean, he has gotten some support from some of the... Kluwe has got some support over his marriage campaign from some of the higher-ups, but clearly he's saying this club. And then the Green Bay quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, has denied being gay on a radio show.
Oh, yes, I'm not gay. I really, really like women.
I like women.
But you lost your game last weekend, Aaron, and maybe it's because you're not honest.
I couldn't believe they lost in Green Bay. It's so cold, and they're so used to it.
Their record this year was was much worse than the San Francisco 49ers.
All right, Connecticut has directed insurance companies to provide coverage of all treatments related to gender transition.
5th state to do so. And the Rose Parade, I don't know what our order of pictures is here.
What's next?
The Rose, we had told you that the AIDS Healthcare Foundation was going to run a float in the Rose Parade with a gay couple getting married on top, which indeed they did.
But television cameras cut away when that happened.
Unbelievable.
Can't have that. There were protests out there about this.
NBC the anchors read some little scripted thing that was all about the flowers on the float, nothing about the wedding. HGTV, which was supposed to do big coverage, cut away from it.
I don't think NBC has a nose for news.
Oh, yes, they do. Yes, they do. Because Matt Lauer said to Brian Boitano...
He's not even Brian Boitano, who's finally come out, and he goes, now, Brian, let's come out.
I don't know whether I should say this,
but it's not a big surprise. That was pretty good for Matt Lauer.
It really was.
And Boitano's going around saying, yeah, it was a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, he just avoided the question. Robin Roberts, as long as we're on network TV, I watched her return to GMA after the holidays. And George Stephanopoulos turns to her and says, oh, we're so happy for you and Amber. We've always loved her.
We just couldn't talk about it because you wouldn't talk about it.
You must have gotten a big reaction to your announcement on your Facebook page. And Robin says, George, it's been a tough year, but I've never been happier or healthier.
Oh, there you are.
And George says, but surely you got some reaction to coming out. And she just says, yes, and moves on completely, would not mention it. She did say something about having gone to some niece's wedding and showed a picture, and Amber there with her. Also, Michelle Obama tweeted when this news broke to Robin, so happy for you and Amber. You continue to make us all proud.
How about Gayle King and Oprah? What did they tweet?
I'm not convinced there's anything going on there.
Anyway, well, listen, Robin and Brian, who were in your 50s, in Mississippi, a lesbian student, Destin Holmes, 17, is suing the Moss Point School District after harassment from, there she is, after harassment from teachers, administrators, and students. I'm still human, she said. I am not an alien. She says the principal called her a pathetic fool and said he didn't want a dyke in this school. A teacher forced her to use the boys' toilet and wouldn't let her participate in boys versus girls games, forcing her to stand in the middle of the floor while the game was going on.
Terrible.
These people probably call themselves Christians.
Yeah. Thomas Roberts, back to network television, has a new job at MSNBC. He's going to take over the 5:30 a.m. show way too early and be probably a regular on Morning Joe. There's some debate about whether this is a promotion or a demotion.
Right.
It's actually a more prominent spot than his 11 a.m. Show, and I wonder whether his 11 a.m. show is being given to Mia Farrow and Woody Allen's son, Ronan Farrow, who is also rumored to be
he's gay, but he he said in his Times interview he doesn't like to be the story. Well, why do you think you got this job? Because you're anyway. I
Clay,
realize he's a bright guy. He went to college when he was
I
11.
don't
He's
care.
got an
He
interesting
doesn't deserve
story.
a TV show.
But anyway, Orange County, kind of a breakthrough in the Tet Parade, Vietnamese American parade there. It'll no longer ban gay Vietnamese. They voted 51 to 36 to include them for the Lunar New Year on February 1st. But we don't want them waving no rainbow flags.
It's not clear yet. They're asking. What the parade rules say is no political statements or
Why
something.
are we always political?
Exactly. So it's not determined yet. It is still under discussion.
Rainbow flags.
Still under
Everything is political.
Also still under discussion is the sexual orientation of Illinois Republican Representative Aaron Schock. Now, it hasn't been under discussion in this show, where we assume him to be a gay person.
Well, apparently, Itay Hod, who's a reporter for CBS, has a friend who saw him in the shower with his roommate.
Yes.
That's I know he wants to save water, but because he's a good conservationist.
Now, the one reason this is of particular interest is because Schock, of course, as a Republican representative, is one of the most anti-gay representatives in Congress. He's voted against Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, against anything to do with marriage, against hate crimes law. I mean, he has a 0 rating from the HRC.
Even if by some unusual circumstance he's not gay, you would think that some of what he's experienced, because he is talked about as being gay, would teach him about some of the discrimination that we face.
Well, you'd think anyone who wears Tattersall shirts and aqua belts and white pants would be willing to go along with the gay agenda, but evidently not.
Well, in Marble Falls, Texas, a Boy Scout leader there, Tom Farley, has said that his approach to having a gay scout in the troop would be the same thing as having a thief. He said, in Christian love, I would say, you've got a problem and that we definitely will not approve of it, and we would send him for pastoral counseling.
Do we have to quote every anti-gay bigot on this show?
We're going through a little transition here in the Scouts.
Yes, but his council leader said that is inappropriate and will not be happening.
And what are they going to do to him?
Maybe they'll be getting rid of him. But more importantly, the new head of the Scouts, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, has a new book out. We thought Robert Gates, having overseen the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, would be a great shot in the arm for the Scouts and could get gay leaders in. But one of the things he says in his book, evidently, is that he thought Obama's handling of Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a mess, and he did not appreciate it.
What about the way? Do you think he was insincere in his support for open service?
I think he was insincere about a lot of stuff.
Well, I always thought it looked like a hostage tape when he was testifying for that. He was so tightly wound.
I think that was his response to everything Obama did.
If I'm not allowed to quote anti-gay bigots, am I supposed to skip the Evander Holyfield story?
I don't know it, so.
Well, he said
he'll have to test me.
He is a contestant on the UK version of Celebrity Big Brother, and he's on there live and whatever.
Yeah.
Being gay ain't normal. Compared it to a handicap, but thought better of the analogy and said it's a choice. That ain't the way nobody is made. Anyway, he made these statements, and they haven't decided what to do with them.
No, I don't think we should quote that.
He has fathered. He's had 3 wives and fathered 11 children.
All legal.
This is what God wants. That's good Christian.
Liz Cheney has dropped out of the Wyoming Senate race.
She cited an illness in the family, but Liz, your sister Mary is not sick. It hasn't been a mental illness since 1973. I know it's one of her kids.
Referring to a child with diabetes, but her public spat with her sister was regarded as one of the things that undermined her candidacy, which was never going anywhere anyway.
All right.
And the Department of Defense, to refer back to Gates, has, under its new management, has issued regulations to clarify that all references to spouse or married people in DoD regulations includes same-sex couples.
All right. So we've got a bunch of obituaries to do on this show
Yes,
this
go
week.
ahead. 'Cause
Well, we got a picture of my old friend Herb Cohen there with his partner Dan Cook, if we can bring that up, who died that's Herb on the left there. He died at 89 on Monday. He became an activist after the age of 50, mostly due to the AIDS crisis. Very involved with raising money around AIDS, very active with SAGE. And he was a great supporter of ours. But I like to hold up Herb as an example of, people say, well, that generation, they grew up in a different time.
He was 89.
They couldn't do this.
Yeah.
Hey, you can do it at any age.
Absolutely.
And Herb did it for 30 years.
It makes me very sad when people don't acknowledge what went on before Stonewall.
Yeah. Well, he and Danny were together for 52 years.
Yeah. Sorry to lose her
Yes.
very much. And also sorry to lose, on the other end, a young man of so much promise, Daniel McClung, playwright, 27 years old.
That's him on the right there in the picture with his husband.
Just married in July, just moved into a new apartment in an apartment building in New York called The Strand. There was fire in the building. They were caught in a staircase.
They went to a stairwell when apparently the best advice is stay inside, put wet rags by the door to not let the smoke get in. You get a better chance.
And they were overcome with smoke.
It's a natural instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he evidently had a heart attack in the middle of being overcome with the smoke.
Smoke inhalation is tough. And longtime activist Tom Charlton of Charleston, South Carolina, has died at 67. He's a past president of the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club in Washington, created the LGBT Studies program at the College of Charleston.
And a news update on the death of Yale professor Samuel C. in jail after he'd been arrested in the midst of a domestic dispute with his husband. The police are now saying that he was the victim of a methamphetamine drug overdose and had a heart attack in the midst of that. Rumors of police misconduct.
And we have the very sad news
rebutted.
about our old buddy Carl Goodman. We have a picture of him. That's him on the right there with his partner Mario. He was one of the co-founders of ACT UP, meaning he was there at the creation of it. He died at the age of 58, a suicide in Rhode Island. I knew him in Dignity in the gay Catholic group many years ago, and he was a very cheerful, colorful, wonderful presence in the movement.
And also sad to hear of the death of Gene Stavis, who was a producer of one of the very early gay TV shows preceding this one, if you can imagine that. Emerald City, which ran on
early 70s.
Yeah. I booked some guests on that show.
Wow. How old are you?
Very.
And
he was a film studies professor at the School of Visual Arts and beloved by his
And someone
students.
we will not miss is the anti-gay bigot Bob Grant, who was sort of the predecessor to people like Rush Limbaugh and all those other types on the radio, who really worked hard against our rights and was a racist dog.
I want to hopscotch through a few headlines because we're running out of time. Clay Aiken, the singer and runner-up on American Idol, may run for Congress in North Carolina as a Democrat. In Maine, there's a political fight. Mike Michaud, the somewhat conservative Democrat who came out as gay, is running for governor. Now the gay organizations are supporting him, but a former head of Quality Maine, Betsy Smith, is endorsing his opponent, an independent who's really pissed off because he's really supported the gay community for years, and he says, this guy's a latecomer and you're just supporting him because he's gay. It's a fight. I'm not taking sides. In Mormon territory, two anti-gay Mormon groups have merged. Evergreen has merged with a new one, North Star. They're a little slicker, but they're still very anti-gay. And the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers has adopted a new code of ethics which includes sexual orientation and gender identity non-discrimination. This was a change that was pushed by two trans women who are members of the engineering community.
Sounds like we're making progress.
It does sound like it. Let's see if we really are.
Well, are we switching to international news?
Yes.
Well, in South Africa, LGBT people are worried that with Mandela gone, the leadership of the country could backslide on their rights, even though it's in the Constitution.
Yeah.
The current president, Jacob Zuma, has made anti-gay statements calling same-sex marriage a disgrace to the nation and God. The Chief Justice belongs to a right-wing church that believes gay people can be cured.
Our loyal Australian viewer, Tony Pittman, has put together a new assessment of marriage around the world. He says 700 million people now live in jurisdictions where same-sex marriage is legal, not including Australia, we have to add.
Right. In Israel, the tax authority issued a directive equating same-sex couples with married couples, granting them additional tax credits.
In Jamaica, you know about the music murder singer Sizzla, who among others sings about murdering and burning up gay people. He's been barred around the world from various performances and getting visas. Now he's been barred from a music festival in Jamaica because he's kept singing this kind of stuff. He went on a rant against gays last month, and his U.S. visa has been revoked again, but he's feeling the backlash in Jamaica.
Yeah. Better news from Germany, where the environmental minister Barbara Hendricks has come out as lesbian, the first out lesbian cabinet member there. Human Rights Watch is still disappointed that the new coalition in Germany has not introduced a marriage equality bill.
Well, maybe that'll change because in addition to Barbara Hendricks, a prominent soccer player, Thomas Hitzelsperger, has come out. He's a very popular guy and considered the most prominent soccer player to come out. And he may change that in Germany. We'll see.
Pope Francis was speaking to a group, and do we do this? No. Says that gay unions raise challenges for us. He recalled a sad little girl who told her teacher, "My mother's fiance, girlfriend, doesn't love me. How can we proclaim Christ to a generation that is changing," he said, by getting rid of some of your bad teachings. And things like that.
You're picking and choosing, Pope. In Chile, a civil unions bill is advancing in the Senate. That's good news.
A couple of other Russian things.
Yep.
Glenn Beck says the media is focusing on Duck Dynasty when it should be zeroing in Glenn Beck on anti-gay atmosphere in Russia. He said, "I will stand with GLAAD on this," calling the Russians guilty of hetero-fascism.
Yeah, fine.
Hey.
Meanwhile, Putin touring Sochi says that the security forces could okay more demonstrations as long as they're not against the Olympics and still probably 9 miles away from any of the venues. And the IOC says, "Isn't this great? That's just what we were looking for."
And the Russian actor who said that we should be burned up in ovens happens to work for Euroset, which is he's the creative director there, which is a big like Apple company, and they're trying to get Apple to fire him, but they won't fire Ivan the Terrible.
New polls in Russia show Putin's approval rating is its lowest in 13 years because the economy is so bad, but at the same time, the Russian people support the anti-gay law.
And the Australian bobsled team in Sochi is now officially sponsored by the Principle 6 campaign, which is the pro-gay campaign there.
Yeah, and there's a German skier, Felix Neureuter, who won a big race and announced immediately that he opposes the anti-gay law.
Okay.
And I saw the Pussy Riot film, which is playing on HBO and on demand. Really, really good. Really
disturbing.
And really introduces you to these women who are tremendously
And it will
brave.
give you a feel for what's like the stuff that David was telling us about in Russia.
Yeah. AIDS news. ACT UP showed up at the inauguration of new New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio.
They want him to prioritize HIV/AIDS prevention. The group has been trying to meet with him to no avail.
Yes, and they want a new health commissioner who's a little more urgent about these
Representative
issues.
Jared Polis, a Democrat of Colorado, has introduced a bill in Congress to legalize marijuana nationwide. Governor Cuomo is going to allow it in 20 hospitals for medical reasons.
I'm very curious about why he's changed. He's
And
usually
then there's
more
that big
obstinate
long
than
letter
that.
to the CDC from the HIV Prevention Justice Alliance, which if you write to us, we'll send you a copy of.
Yeah. You know, I've been watching a lot of football.
Yes.
I don't follow along during the year,
neither.
but you get to the bowl games, the
First downs,
NFL playoffs,
forward passes.
So I turn on the Sugar Bowl, Alabama versus Oklahoma in
Yes.
New Orleans, and who's singing the national anthem? Brian Batt from Mad Men, the out gay actor. An antique dealer, I think, in New Orleans.
What does Governor Jindal have to say about that?
Well, I don't know, but imagine my surprise
There you are.
See we really are everywhere. And I was also interested to be reminded that Armistead Maupin's last Tales of the City book, his 9th, Days of Anna Madrigal, is going to be released at the end of this month, I think.
A man and a girl. Remember that in the show?
Vaguely, yeah.
He gave her the name Anna Madrigal, but he didn't know if you rearrange the letters, it would spell that.
Oh, I
And then he used
see.
it in the story.
And you know how old she is in this book? 92 and headed for the Burning Man Festival.
Well, they do stuff like that out there. Stephen Fry, the out gay actor on Broadway in Twelfth Night, which you must see if you haven't, it's the best thing on Broadway, will do a West End production of The Importance of Being Earnest this fall as Lady Bracknell.
No, very traditional.
Oh, and by the way, a show I loved from London, Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, which is the one with the roof fell in over in London over there, but about an autistic boy. They're going to bring that to Broadway this fall.
And I just want to remind you that you have just till the end of this month to catch the legendary Peggy Shaw at La Mama doing her one-woman performance, Rough. And with an exhibit called Desperate Archives of the whole Split Britches archive still playing there.
Yeah.
We have just a little over a minute left. We should tell people about our new free speech airing schedule. We're
Yes.
going to have 2 airings on Friday and 3 on Saturday.
Our airings, they're changing us because they're bringing in Stephanie Miller to take some of our time. Friday at 1 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern, and Saturday at 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern. This will all be in the email if you write to me, andyhum@aol.com. I'll keep you posted about any schedule changes.
Yes, do write to Andy at andyhum@aol.com. You'll get
Because I don't get enough email.
You'll get 1 weekly email from Andy,
That's
and
correct.
personal emails if you write him personally, telling you what the headlines are for the week and where to find us and all sorts of stuff like
people
that.
share news with us, and that's nice.
Oh, yeah, by all means, send us news items or, your opinion on things.
Yes.
Because we certainly
Most
are.
of you are not shy.
As if we are. we're not even shy with each other.
We welcome the dialogue.
We
We're all
certainly
here to
do.
learn.
And we were really happy to have David Teller join us this week. Again, you can find his piece on his latest trip to Russia on BuzzFeed. Far from the biggest cities, being gay is still dangerous, or whatever it's
it's a
called.
threat.
But if you put in "far from the biggest cities" on BuzzFeed, you'll find that piece. And we will see you next week.
We
Thank
hope it's
you.
warmer.
Oh my God, yes. You can take your coat off.
No, I have to go outside now.
I hope we're back in our
It'd
regular
probably be
studio.
warmer out there.
Please fix the machines in our regular studio and let us back there.
Please.
But we'll see you one way or another next week because
Thanks for watching.
Gay USA never sleeps.
Oh my, I certainly don't these days.
Okay.